I just got this book in today. I was telling Jamie about it. I just bought that for, now that we've got our son.
Kids in an inside world.
Steve Ranella, who's got the Meat Eater show on Netflix, which is all like, I love that show, even though I'm not a hunter.
Yeah, that's, where we live, I know my kids are still indoor kids, but I mean, we've got a lot of space, and that's one of the things that I think my kids are going to look back on and be thankful for is that they had the opportunity to get outside, right? When they were little, we used to take walks out, and we've got this big 1.5 acres of spruce trees they used to call the big woods, right? Someone planted them in the 70s. They're like these, 100-foot tall spruce trees, and it's all empty underneath it. It's really eerie, actually. It's really eerie. But that's the kind of stuff that I don't think they appreciate much at this stage of their lives, but hopefully.
I mean, I grew up, we always spent summers in Skinny Atlas. Just we were like really lucky. My grandparents had a lot of money, and Grandpa had back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s. If there was a jukebox, pinball machine, cigarette machine in central New York, pretty much, definitely in Syracuse, you got it from him. And so they were never really like flashy with their money, but they had the small, camp on Skinny Atlas. And so we used to, growing up as a kid, we vacationed there. There was no Disney or theme park or anything, or Florida or California or anything like that. It was always, we're going to Skinny Atlas for a week. And that's still what I long for, is like being able to just one day have a place on water. So, but I didn't grow up with an iPhone in my hand.
Right.
And so I hope, like our son, I've been saying, I was saying before he was born, I was like, our kids, they're not going to have a computer in their room, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
we kept the computers out of their rooms. For a while, right, it's like you leave your phones downstairs. They get to a certain age, and what are you going to do? Just like pester them constantly, right? I mean, so we did. They don't have computers in their rooms, but we were able to do that.
But our son at 5 months old, if we're sitting, we'll be sitting there like with him on our lap, playing with him, and if the TV's on, he will swivel his head to find the television.
Oh yeah.
If I have my phone, like if I'm holding him and I have to
it's
respond
addictive.
to a text, he'll start grabbing for the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't know what he's doing, but he has opened the phone and like pulled up YouTube.
Right.
While I'm just sitting there holding it,
On purpose?
Obviously not on purpose. He's 5 months old, but I mean, he'd like his,
it might, they're smarter than you think, Yeah.
Yeah. So
they're more attentive to things that you don't think they're paying attention to.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found out that this book existed, and I jumped on it and bought it immediately.
Yeah. No. I think it's a harder and harder thing to do, to get them outside and keep them engaged with stuff outside. But I think whatever you can do, I think that's going to pay dividends. Yeah. I mean, I grew up here in Chittenango, very urban. I didn't grow up farming. I didn't grow up, I don't know where I got it from. But, I love just walking outside. I can occupy myself just kind of looking at trees and looking at birds. And, that's very relaxing and meditative for me. But I spent a lot of time outside, but, it was a housing development. It wasn't like we're walking in the woods all the time, but, we'd make forts out of open areas. And so, I guess it doesn't have to be a national park, right? It's just being outside, just seeing the nature and seeing how things are blooming in the spring or growing in the spring, and then declining in the fall, and the cycle of life. And I mean, maybe that's what got me into farming, is just enjoying that stuff. I don't know, but I always kind of wanted a refuge, kind of away from everything.
When did you start the company? When did you start growing mushrooms?
We started growing mushrooms in 2008.
Okay.
We did it part-time for about 7 years, and we've been doing it full-time for about 8 years.
Yeah.
And did a lot of other things. But yeah, it was 2000. We moved up here. So I grew up in Chittenango. Went to school down in SUNY Binghamton. And then one summer I did an internship here at the zoo in Syracuse. And that was got a degree in biology, and I was, I didn't know what I was going to do with that. But I didn't. It's kind of interesting. I didn't really have much direction other than I knew I was interested in this. And then, you get to the end and you're like, what am I going to do? And I did some internships, and so really all I knew was working in zoos. So I applied to a bunch of zoos. Ended up in Salt Lake City, working in an aviary out there, working with birds. Did that for a few years, got married while I was out there. My wife's from New York, but we got married while we were out there. And then I had our first kid out there too.
Okay.
And then ended up moving to Connecticut and working at the Bronx Zoo for about a year.
Wow.
I was like, got a kid, need health insurance, right? Need something like I'm working at this little tiny zoo. They're paying you basically nothing to work there. It's a great experience. For a while, I was like the curator, like the managing the whole collection, just because there wasn't one there, right? So it's a great experience. And that's what I was doing it for. And now I'm looking to, maybe move up in the zoo world. And so this was a good opportunity. And maybe this is why I went so extreme and moved out to Lebanon, a real rural area, right? But I'm working in the Bronx and taking the train down to the Bronx and Fordham Station. And then it's so expensive every evening. I was working another job. And so after a year of that, I decided I was done with the zoos, and I ended up working at Trader Joe's for 3 years in Connecticut.
Okay.
And then we had our second kid, and we were just done with downstate.
Yeah.
Ended up buying our place up here, moving up here. Didn't have any job whatsoever. And I had worked in a farm one summer in school, and they had some logs. They had mushroom logs. They had bought some from somebody, and so we had sold them at a farmer's market. And I was like, well, kind of know what I'm doing. So I went ahead and inoculated a bunch of logs, and that's where our first go around into mushrooms came from.
It's amazing the people that I've heard the stories of. It's like extreme switches, like extreme swaps, and then now they're like they've like found what they love, like to go from the Bronx to Lebanon, New York,
It's essentially what we were doing, and and that's why I think people often operate that way, and I see my kids. My daughter is going to go to school downstate, and my son's at school down in Florida, right? So they're just like gone.
Yeah.
Right. They're ready to go. They're ready to go.
Yeah.
And they went to a small school there in Hamilton, and they're ready to go. And that's fine. Let them go out, and maybe that's where they want to be. But sometimes I think that it takes some time to experience this world and all the joys of it,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
and then settle into where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got to experience that sort of stuff, I mean, hopefully, I don't know what age. I don't know what age you should experience all that kind of stuff, but
that's a good point, and that's an attitude I always took was, they're gonna experience this stuff. They're going to a small private school down in Hamilton, it's a really small school, like 100 kids total.
Okay.
And so definitely sheltered to some degree, right?
Yeah.
But let's have them experience that stuff when they have a little bit more maturity, a little bit more, foundation, I guess. That's kind of the attitude I've always taken.
Yeah, for sure.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
When I was 18, I graduated high school and I moved to Lebanon, Ohio which is
interesting. Yeah.
just
Lots
a
of
little bit,
Lebanons out there.
yeah, just a little smaller than Lebanon, New York.
Yeah.
Not much though, but
Yeah.
yeah, Lebanon, Ohio, and interned at a church.
Okay.
Still found a way to get into trouble, but that's what I was doing when I
Yeah.
was 18.
So away from your family, just
Well, kind of, sort of. So I
Yeah.
was Lebanon, Ohio was about an hour and a half hour north of where I grew up when I was younger in northern Kentucky.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I went out there to intern at a church that my sister was the youth pastor at, and my aunt and uncle were like assistant pastors at.
Yeah.
So I was out there with family still, but and my sister and I have rented an apartment together. But yeah, that was when I was in high school. That's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to go off to Bible college and become a pastor, and that was going to be my life, sort of a thing. And so that's what I put a lot of focus into there for a little bit. And we were connected in that stuff for a while.
But yeah, it's just an adventure to Ohio, right?
Yeah, adventure to Ohio.
Yeah.
There is. I will say there's fewer. There aren't as many feelings, like great feelings, that I've experienced in my life as packing up a car and moving somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you're driving multiple states.
We packed up from Utah. We had our moving van. I can't even remember how we got our car there, but we had our van and we had our parakeet in the front seat. And we had no place to live, right? And this is just, I guess, my personality. And my wife was just kind of along for the ride. I was like, oh, it'll work out. We'll figure it out. Right?
Yeah.
And so we drive to New York City, and we kind of had a friend. We had one friend in Connecticut who let us spend the night, right? But we drive in, and it's a Friday afternoon, and everybody's going north, and the roads are just jam-packed, right? And we've got this van, and we got the car, and we've got no place to live, and we've got, my son is July, August, September, October, November. He's like 4 months old.
Wow.
And oh boy.
Yeah, that's an experience.
That was a stressful time.
I bet.
But I hear you about packing up. We've done a couple at least 2 cross-country trips that we kind of wove some mushroom training into. But
yeah,
we took some weekend seminars out on the West Coast. But yeah, packing up that car and going is exciting.
Yeah, it really
and
is.
we've always done it like, when we're tired, we'll stop and we'll find a hotel.
Yeah.
When we find something that we want to do, we'll go and do it, right? If you have a few plans, but for the most part, it's like, it's like real freedom for a week, right? Or 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't imagine doing it with, I'm older, so but I couldn't imagine doing it with, a family. But when I was 36, so this is it was like 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago. At the time, I was up in Northern California in Redding. I drove my car from Redding down to San Diego, which is like 12, 13-hour drive. I left Redding at 11 at night, so I slept at a travel stop in the car, drove down to San Diego the next morning, picked up, very long story that I won't go into on the podcast, but picked up a family that I was that knew and I was kind of working for. We were vacationing in San Diego at the time. Drove from San Diego back to Texas, where both of us lived in Central Texas, and then, which is, a day and a half, 2-day trip, and spent a week there. And I had been living there for 3 years, and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to get back home to Syracuse. So within that week, lined up a job back here and fit whatever would fit in my car at the time, and left, I think, at the same time. Left at 11 o'clock at night, and drove all the way back. Slept in my car the whole way back from Texas to Syracuse. I didn't stop and get a hotel or anything. I just kept driving. But I will say, there's few feelings. There's few great feelings of just doing that and kind of knowing that you're leaving somewhere and going somewhere else.
Yeah.
But there's also something about driving through the Southwest when it's hot. You've got the windows down. Back then, I smoked cigarettes, and having a cold Diet Coke, listening to music, smoking a Marlboro Light.
Yeah.
There's few things that I have found that I appreciated more than those experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's very Wild West-esque is what
yeah,
it sounds like to me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah. We had some good adventures in Arizona when we lived in Utah, and
yeah.
yeah, it's a fun area, and I think we might, maybe someday we'll end up in Utah. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, the adventures with the kids are much
Yeah,
it's a little tougher. But
yeah, for sure.
still,
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
it's still good. I mean, we went when they were, both under 10 once, and then we went
Okay.
when they were more like 13, 14, somewhere in that area. And
Okay.
yeah, they do okay.
Yeah.
Our kids did okay. I can't speak for all kids, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got the two.
yeah. So 2 kids. We've got one that's turning 21 this year, and one that just turned 18. We're kind of at that stage of our lives where getting the younger one through high school. She's finishing up this year, and yeah, it's kind of transitioning a little bit. I mean, I don't really know. Bringing it back to mushrooms a bit. I mean, this business has worked really well for us
Yeah.
for the past 8 years. It's given us a lot of flexibility to do the things that we want to do, like, coaching sports, or giving me the ability to be home every evening, right? And so the question is, how do we make it work for us in this new, I mean, we're going to have new goals, right? Different lifestyle, different, just different. And so how do we make it work for us in that? I mean, at first we need to figure out what we want, right? And then make it work for us. But
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are right now, where the mushroom business is.
You like have plans, you think, to like, I think of like Barry, from Two Kids Goat Farm. They're planning. They're going down to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard that podcast. Yeah. I think that we're pretty attached to this space, and my parents are still here.
Okay.
So I don't think that we're necessarily moving
Yeah.
anywhere. I mean, I could see maybe, maybe down the road a little bit farther, maybe doing something out west or something. But no immediate plans. I mean, short term, we're probably you'll probably do some home renovations that we haven't been putting off for 15 years. But besides that, we're still parenting, but trying to figure out what the next 20 years of our lives are going to look like, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to early 20s, right? What's your life going to look like, right? It's different because you're still parenting, but still exciting in a lot of ways.
I mean, really, up until like my son was born, I still was thinking about like literally tomorrow. I wasn't thinking 5 years down the road. But except for one, my wife and I had a conversation 2 Christmases ago before we got pregnant, and we were leaving my in-laws in Boonville and driving back to Syracuse, and I think it was Christmas Eve, but or one of the trips. Anyways, she's going to listen to this and tell me my dates and times are completely off.
It doesn't matter.
But we were driving back from Boonville, and I was just thinking to myself, like, hey, we need to start having kids. And up until that conversation, the thought was when we get into a bigger house or whatever, get to the next stage in life, we'll start to think about having kids. But I just sat there and I was like doing the math, and I was like, but our parents are older. My dad just turned 70. I'm 35. Like, how old are we going to be if we keep putting this off? How old are we going to be when our kids are graduating high school? Like, what about their kids? What about us becoming grandparents? Like, we really need to start to move. And then now, since he's been born, it's amazing how far ahead you start to think and try to plan for. Start to plan for 10 years and 20 years down the road, and what's that going to look like when they're out of college and all that kind of stuff. So
we never really had much we had a couple years in Utah, which maybe that's why we always think we'll go back there, which were, kind of fun and carefree. And
Hmm.
then we had kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't know that it was, would I do it the same way again? I don't know. Probably.
Yeah.
But,
Hmm.
but definitely cut short our, carefree 20s. That's for sure.
Yeah. My older brother, who he has 3 kids, and that are all under the age of 4, and Robert is 41. Robert has always been like a what if, like kind of like what am I missing out on sort of a person, and and really more so when he started to have kids, and I've noticed that been having those thoughts, like thinking about like, oh man, what if I had made this turn in life? What if I had made that? What if I had stayed in Texas? What if I had done this? And I've been thinking that way for a while, like let's say the last 2-3 years, or ever since I got married. And that was a joke, honey, if you're listening. But I did have the thought recently.
Everybody's had that thought.
But I did have the follow-up thought to all of that recently when I was like driving somewhere thinking about, man, what if I still lived in Texas? Would life really be that much better? Like would I have become a millionaire if I lived there? And the answer is no.
Yeah, you'd be having the same thoughts in Texas, right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yep. And I think yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we missed out. I mean, you can say we missed out on, having kids early, but having the kids and being up here with my parents is, it's kind of the deeper stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? It's the stuff that when you're sitting in your chair and you can't really do much anymore, that's the stuff that you're thankful for, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have very little regrets.
Yeah.
As far as where we're living or when we had kids or having kids or that's something that that's something that I think we've done the best we could, right? Certainly not perfect, certainly fell short on certain aspects of family and raising kids, but there's not much that I look back on and say that I regret or that I could have done better or so I'm thankful for that and there are certainly we could have had a lot more fun, right? Making other choices, right? But so yeah, that's kind of where I am, reflecting. You at this point, you reflect a lot. Like, it's only really. My son might be home for the summer. I don't really know, but we're gonna have a couple months in the summer probably where all 4 of us are there, and then they're gonna go their separate ways, and there'll be opportunities to be together again, but it's never gonna be like it was before, right? It's gonna be totally different. And so you just naturally kind of reflect on the past 20 years. And
what's that like? What's that like going from? Yeah, I mean, like, give me some advice as a new father over here. Like, what is that like going from having a small child to then raising kids as they're getting older?
Yeah, so this is. Having for me, I mentioned flexibility, right? So this job that I have gives me flexibility. And so I talk to other farmers and they're just constantly going, right? And they're like, well, how do you create time for family? And for me, it's always been putting that decision first. Like, so for example, on Wednesday, I haven't we're doing softball right now, coaching softball every single day. This is our between soccer and softball, we've done about 11 seasons, and this is our final one.
Wow.
So it's a little sad. Softball, baseball has always been something that's kind of tied my wife and I together. But so the work has suffered, right? We sterilize every single week. Didn't get any done last week. Haven't done any yet. Tomorrow is the first opportunity I'm going to have to do it this week. My wife took the day off from work, and she wants to go roller skating with my daughter, right?
Yeah.
So I could say, all right, I gotta get the work done. I can't go, right? And I feel like a lot of farmers would do that. I got to plow the field. Right? I got to get planting done. Right? I mean, different types of farming have different different time frames of when things need to be done. But with what we do, probably going to go roller skating, right? and I almost feel like, is it going to help the business? No. Is it going to cause us to go bankrupt? No. Right? And so I see a very clear, this is the right decision to make, right? And it seems simplistic, but it'll probably have consequences down the line, right? Where maybe because we didn't get something done, we don't have the mushroom for a customer or something like that, right? Probably have consequences. But especially now, how many more opportunities am I gonna have to do something like that, right? So let's go do it, right? Let's have fun. Let's spend some time together. And it's kind of a string of those decisions, right? 20 years of those decisions. And could our business be twice as big if we made a string of the opposite decisions? Maybe. Yeah, possibly. But like I said, I don't regret those decisions. I don't regret making that. And I don't think, I might regret that decision 3 weeks down the road when the customer asks me for mushrooms and I don't have them. But there's also a chance that 3 weeks down the road, customers need to take a week off and we have a ton of mushrooms and it doesn't affect anything, right? And so even if I regret it for a couple days temporarily, long term, it's the right decision, right? When, again, going back to when they're gone, when, am I gonna regret that 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, 5, 10, 20? No.
Yeah.
Right? No. And so it's just kind of a string of those daily decisions. When I'm tired in the evening and do I want to drive my daughter to gymnastics? No, but I did it for probably 6-7 years and hung out there and, watched her do gymnastics and videotaped, or I'd say videotape, but I guess it, recorded her, right? So she could see what she was doing. And, so yeah, I mean, you're definitely, when you have kids, I mean, your priorities shift, right? And it's different for somebody who has a small business, right? Because you are, or it could be a big business, whatever, right. Any your own business as opposed to working a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Because you work a 9 to 5 and, you come home and you don't always, you can turn that off, right? Small business owners, you're just going all the time. You're thinking about your business all the time.
Yeah.
And so the only way to spend time with family is to sacrifice business, right? Sacrifice your work. And that's what I've done.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it. And I think that's the best advice I can give is don't be afraid to. Obviously, you got to pay the bills, right? And everybody's in different situations, and but it's not like we're swimming in money, right? I mean, I'm not making those decisions because I got a full bank account and it doesn't matter, right? I'm making those decisions, and the bank account's going to suffer, and yeah. So
it's the decisions that I've made. Like I was, basically took on a job without boring with all the details that I've mentioned in other episodes. So you're welcome, listeners.
Yeah, I'm sure I've heard them.
But I was at Limp. I made a decision to work at Limp Lizard and run that location for the first 2 months, and that was a dumb decision, especially right when we had a newborn. But then coming out, and then after like 2 months, just realizing that was a stupid decision, and because I was seeing my wife like 4 hours a week that we were awake together. So getting out of that, I was thinking to myself, this is Eat Local New York. Like there's something here I could try and go back at it and go full time with it, or I could just go get a job. And so it was really my wife's pushing that kind of led me to like not take the couple job offers that I got and just try and do this because of that flexibility. Yeah. But I will say it's the tenacity that I have today versus a year ago for this, for things that we're doing for Eat Local is completely different now that we've got a kid. Now that it's like, okay, not only are there more expenses, but there's expenses that have to be met. There are bills that have to, things that have to be done. It's like a year and a half ago, I may have said, I don't need to chase after that customer. I don't really have to go after that deal. It's not a big deal. It's $1,000. Who cares? Today I'm like, we are getting that deal. So that's been a really interesting experience. This is our first son, so our first child. So it's really weird feeling. I've been keeping a journal of things that I write to him that I plan on giving him, one day when he's an adult of, I started that back when we found out that she was pregnant, and I've been recording. I'll come in here sometimes and sit down with a beer and talk to, for an hour. And I don't plan on giving that to him until he's an adult.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it is this really weird feeling that her and I have talked about of like right now we have this really intimate connection with him. Like if he needs something, we pick him up and we hold him. And, if he's crying, we have to pick him up and soothe him at night or, whatever all these different things. He can't take care of himself. So, what closer connection do you have with another human being than taking care of them? But as he gets older, he won't need that level of care.
Right.
And B, he will never remember these moments. He's 5 months old. He's never going to have a memory of.
Yeah, right. You won't have physical memories, but I think they have some.
They have if they don't have that sense.
They remember that comfort, right?
Yeah,
and they remember that feeling of being. I'm no expert, right? But I have a sense that they remember that feeling of being secure and comforted and loved, right?
Yeah,
and I think there's probably consequences if they don't have that, right?
Yeah, you get serial killers.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So it's important.
Yeah,
definitely important.
I was talking to Jamie a little bit about this, who was on just before this, and to completely shift gears, but over the past couple of years, over the past 6-7 months, I've really started to see how much the food scene in Central New York has kind of lost its way. Like prior to COVID, there was a lot more talk about great chefs and what they were, and focused on what they were doing, and excitement about what they were doing. And when a new restaurant opened up that was doing something wonderful, there was a talk about that. From exceptional restaurants like St. Urban or Eden, or Deefy when they were opened, or Amano, and many others, but to also places like the Brinewell Eatery, who was doing garbage plates but ordering from 15 different farms. And since COVID, especially more recently, the conversation has shifted from look at this exceptional food that this person is creating with local ingredients to who has 50-cent wings. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's been really the main focus. And I think part of that is, kind of recession based. Not that we're officially in a recession, but
Yeah.
things are obviously massively more expensive.
Yeah.
and-
People are more focused on price now.
right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it's that, but I think part of it's just we've the culture, and so I'm really focused on trying to figure out how Eat Local New York plays a role in shifting that conversation back towards exceptional food and ingredients here in Central New York. I don't really know exactly how we're supposed to do that, although we've got a couple things that we're going to start doing. Like we're coming out with our best top 76 restaurants in Central New York list, and hopefully that does a little bit of something. And have an idea for like a good food festival, just featuring great food and from restaurants and chefs. But and I started talking to Mark about some stuff, but it's just something that I've really been, saddened by over the past few months, is realizing that we've kind of lost that focus. So
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is just because, well, A, it's been a couple years since you've been on, and B, because of everything that you do. So yeah, how much of your, obviously you're set up at the market, you have the website where people can purchase, but for consumer facing things, but how much of your work is done with like restaurants around the area?
We about 30%, I would say.
Oh, okay.
We have good half a dozen restaurants that we sell to. It's for us, our focus has always been, focused on getting mushrooms on people's plates, whether that's through a restaurant or through a farmer's market, or and primarily fresh mushrooms. We have a line of dried mushrooms as well, which is available online. We also partner with vegetable farms, CSAs, right? Provide mushrooms to their shares. So we have, but we really only have a couple restaurants in Syracuse. We have a couple in Utica,
Okay.
Hamilton, Casanova, Clinton kind of area. We have a couple in those areas as well. And that suited us pretty well. And, kind of going back to, we could grow more mushrooms, right? We're kind of at a level where we're happy with right now. And I think we probably could take on a couple more restaurants. We've had some people kind of canvassing Syracuse, and I think they picked up one or two, and they've been selling our stuff. But I don't get the sense that I could just walk into any restaurant, knock on the door, and sell mushrooms. And I feel like that, I think there's a lot of restaurants that would be happy to support a local mushroom farm. I feel like it comes down to price, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times, our mushrooms are much more expensive than the buttons that you can get, right, and from any distributor, right? And so, so there's always that fine line that we're walking, right? We're obviously at the market we get a much higher price, right? When we sell them through a CSA, we get somewhere in between, right? And so, do I want to double the amount of restaurants that we do? Well, that's going to require double the equipment so we can grow more efficiently, right? And so there's an investment in equipment, right?
Yeah.
And so, we're at a point where we're doing pretty well. We've got a lot of flexibility, not when we're talking about flexibility within the family, but flexibility within the business, right? We can pivot to farmers markets if there's another pandemic, or pivot to online, or something if there's another pandemic, or we can bounce between different. We've got our hands in a little bit of everything, and so if one thing's not rolling, something else is rolling, right? And so as our life changes, now we need to make a decision. What do we want to do? We kind of last year we had our we had up to 2 employees at one point last year, and we don't have any now. And one of them, our longtime employee who really helped us start the farm, moved away. And then our payroll person decided they were done doing payroll, and we said, all right, we're just going to take a break. And so we're working harder, making more money now. But, that also plays into, can you grow more mushrooms? Well, not on my own.
Yeah.
Probably at some point down the line, we'll end up with another employee. But, our life's in a lot of transition right now. And so we need to figure out what direction our business is going to go in. And it could be growing more mushrooms, but it just seems like a rat race.
Yeah.
Right? Grow more mushrooms, you get a lower price. It means you need more equipment, right? You need to invest in more equipment. And mushroom equipment is expensive. We could grow thousands of pounds a week. It probably would take us investing about $500,000 somewhere in that area. And then have 10 to 15 employees, right? And is that what we want the next 20 years of our life to be? Because you make that investment, you're probably committing, that amount of time, right? I don't know, and I don't. My guess is probably not. I mean, we're always going to be selling fresh mushrooms to some degree, right? To restaurants, probably. We love going to the market.
Yeah.
Right. We love interacting with the people. I mean, I enjoy selling mushrooms just as much as I enjoy growing them, which I don't think is common for most, historically common for farmers anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But, there's lots of other avenues we could take. We could focus more on dried mushrooms. Right now you have a shelf-stable product, and you're not so worried about shrinkage and spoilage and getting mushrooms out the door every week, right? And there's a lot of niches within the mushroom world. There's supplements, right? There's a lot of good research out there on how good mushrooms are for you, whether they're building your immune system or reducing inflammation or promoting the growth of neurons, or a lot of good research on the health benefits of mushrooms. And that's why you see a kind of an exploding mushroom supplement industry and coffee substitutes. And, so maybe that's a direction that we go, right? I mean, we've been selling grow your own kits lately too. So you bring a block home, put it on your counter, and grow mushrooms yourself, right? Cool. We have a bag or a variety. It's called Garden Giant or King Stropharia, and so you take this block of mycelium grown on sawdust, you plant it in your garden, just like you would a rose bush or whatever, right? Water it, and then the mycelium runs, and as your garden grows, it could be a perennial garden, vegetable garden, doesn't matter. But as the garden grows and provides shade, and then now the mushrooms start popping up underneath.
That's cool.
And so you can pick them and you can eat them. And so just another grow your own option. But, you also see a lot of New York State is going down the psychedelic road, right? It's not going to be long until they approve something probably for therapeutic use, right? And I don't know. I mean, we're going to need a supply, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a road we go down. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different options and niches, and there's people foraging wild mushrooms. There's you dive in a little deeper and you get into like mycofiltration and mycelium breaking down nerve gas and petroleum products, and companies making packing material out of mycelium, right? And so now you're doing something similar to what we're doing, but you're putting your mycelium in a mold, and then you pull it out, and now it's perfect shape for packaging something, and it's degradable, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so many different avenues to go down. But we're good at selling fresh mushrooms, and I'm not quite sure what direction we're gonna go in, but
Yeah. Hey, let's pause for 1 second. I gotta run to the restroom.
yeah, sure, no
Between
problem.
the coffee and the water and the beer.
Yeah, I hear you, no problem.
Really feel like Joe Rogan now.
Oh yeah.
Up in the middle of a podcast to go to the bathroom.
Well, you get to a certain stage, and you're like, I'm the man. I just gotta go. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's waiting for me, so I'm going. Right. I'll go when I want.
Yeah. I mean, I think the psychedelic. It's something that I would. So the past, I'd say, prior to our son's arrival. So for like the last year and a half, I was really interested in taking, psychedelic mushrooms. We actually had a podcast scheduled. I was going to do with Rich and Chris and Tim. And the plan was we were all going to come in here and take mushrooms at the beginning of it and then record a podcast. And somebody who I won't mention forgot or didn't forget, but couldn't get the mushrooms. So
Okay,
we went up
that was my question. Where'd you get them, or how'd you get them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A friend of mine actually from that episode that never aired, she wound up giving, who takes them all the time. She wound up getting me some and gave me, and I still have them at the house. But I wanted to take them because I felt like it would bring me to a space where to unlock some form of like creativity, like in regarding to the business that I just couldn't tap into myself. And the more and more people that I kind of talked to and told that story to, they were like, "Oh yeah, we take mushrooms all the time," and I was like, "You do it?" Because you're not somebody I really want to emulate my life after.
Fair
So
enough.
maybe I'm not going to have the experience I hope for.
Well, I think it's I mean, I've never done it.
Yeah.
Right, but they say you can kind of reset your brain or whatever, and there's definitely you want to have somebody with you who has done it, right, and can kind of guide you through it. You don't want 4 guys in a room who've never done it before and just take a handful of mushrooms. I mean that could work out great, but it could be you could be crying in a corner for 3 hours and just have a horrible experience, right? And so there's always that risk of a bad experience, and I think the more like somebody who has done it before, and that's why they're not just going to legalize, right? It's going to be, well, you can use them through a practitioner, right? Somebody who can kind of guide you through it. Somebody who maybe they're a psychiatrist, right? Maybe somebody who's got some experience and can kind of identify, all right, this might be good for you, or this might not be good for you. Because I think there always is that risk. I think for most people, you probably do come out of it, with a different perception, right?
Oh, yeah.
A different outlook on life, and but there is that risk that for some people, it might not work out too well, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to mitigate that as much as possible by having this person alongside you who can kind of guide you through it.
Yeah, I've got a friend who, for years, he's not necessarily an outgoing person, but he also didn't shy away from like getting together with friends or a group. But he would say like, you would never know it from looking at me, but inside I'm like screaming, like, I absolutely hated being around other people. And so he heard of a treatment, and I forget who the person was or organization or group or whatever it was, but it was essentially you like, not overdose, but essentially overdose on mushrooms, like take way too more than you should.
Yeah.
And
there's a term for that. I should know it, but like a huge dose.
Yeah.
Jeez, I should know that. But
macro
anyway.
dose, I don't know, but and then part of the other part of the experience is you are listening with like noise canceling headphones, or like classical music, and you're in a pitch black room, but you have a person that's like guiding you through your trip, and it's supposed to help you sort of expose whatever it is that you're kind of like dealing with, hopefully, and then be able to get help to like go through that, and so get past it. And so, and for him, it it worked. He
Mm-hmm.
went from this person that like absolutely was terrified to hang out with people and be around people he didn't know to now seeking out those like opportunities. And listening to his experience of his trip this sounds crazy, but I grew up in like a really um I grew up in a form of Christianity. It was like very like spiritual based and
Mm-hmm.
like open to different like dream interpretation, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So and there's a experience that I have at church and Christianity that was like life changing for me. That sounds identical to his trip
Yeah.
on mushrooms.
Yeah. Really.
I mean, he was talking to
Like,
me about this stuff. I was like, I've done that through prayer before.
talking in tongues
Yeah,
and
right.
yeah.
And that was also like a pivotal moment in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
so that I thought that was kind of interesting, that connection. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's definitely some overlap there.
for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
don't, yeah. I mean, as a Bible believing Christian, I don't really necessarily, I don't believe that this to be true, but a lot of people think that, Moses, with his experience with the burning bush
yeah.
was, having just consumed magic mushrooms, not
Yeah.
intentionally maybe, but,
Right. Yeah.
and so much of like biblical kind of lore, if you will, was based off of people at the time that were, consuming those mushrooms. There's even,
Yeah. I think there is some evidence, right, that
yeah,
that people can point to that it was, you know, somehow involved in ceremonies and traditions and
yeah,
such. And yeah, I'm not too versed in that, but I've
yeah.
heard that. Yeah.
Right. Even I think like the days of like the Salem witch trial, that a lot
Yeah.
of those people that, had the, whether it was like a physical manifestation or mental manifestation that caused people to believe that they were witches and, burn them, kill them, was based off of a fungus that it was growing on bread or something like that at the
Hmm.
time that they were eating, and it was causing like some weird things. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting how much of a role mushrooms have had throughout human history and so much of our like, even the stories of our traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. It's. I mean, you can go real deep into this, but they are. I mean, just their genetics are closer to humans than they are plants.
Really?
Yep.
That's wild.
They, they take in oxygen like we do and give off CO. I mean, they're totally different. They get grouped in with plants, but significantly different.
Hmm.
A lot of connections. A lot of there's research that shows that there's webs underneath forests, right?
Mhm.
That the mushrooms are interacting with the trees, giving the trees usually minerals, and then maybe the trees give the mushroom sugars. But there's also evidence that shows that the trees can kind of communicate through the, like, if one tree is struggling, right, then more nutrients might head towards that tree. Or the largest organism in the world, I believe, is a honey mushroom. It's a huge big mat of honey mushrooms out west somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What kind of like excites you about that, about the end, about, working with mushrooms? Is it that? Is it that
Well,
kind of stuff?
yeah, so I've given this a lot. What I think is special about working with mushrooms is I think it's unique. I think it's a I think it's a growing industry, right? I mean, think of how many farmers there are in central New York growing vegetables, right? And so there's 2 that I know of that are growing mushrooms, right? And so I think there's a lot of space for that industry to kind of put its foot in and get more people growing mushrooms. I think even now, I think Syracuse could handle a few more mushroom farms, small mushroom farms. But besides the fact that I think it's a good business, I think the fact that we can, I've got one guy who buys 4 pounds from me every week down in Hamilton, right? And we have this small CSA in the Hamilton, so I just deliver to people's doors in Hamilton once a week because I'm down there every day anyway. But he attributes them to, changing in his lifestyle, being healthier, right? And so not only can we make money, but we're also helping people be healthier,
Cool.
right? We have people who come to our farmers market stands or buy stuff from us online who they have cancer. And, sometimes it's a preventative thing. Sometimes there's not much left to do, right? This is the only hope I have.
Yeah.
And, it's not there's really good research that shows that this can help. And it really depends on the doctor. I've had, customers whose doctors will prescribe mushroom supplements to them. Wow. I've had we had a really good customer in Syracuse who passed away last year, and his doctor was like, don't touch it. And, that's fine. I mean, that's a decision everybody's got to make. But it's not being able to, run a business that is giving people who don't have any hope, and at the same time be able to make a living. I feel like, how lucky am I?
Yeah, that's why
that's my favorite part of it.
So it sounds like you kind of don't like. To me, I look at like your business and really being a mushroom farmer is like one source of selling to a restaurant to sell to make food with, but it sounds like you kind of look at it from a very different perspective.
I think I think that's the side of it that is provides that, I love making money, right? I love all the business that we can get at restaurants. I love all the business that we can get at the farmers market. But again, at 20 years from now, am I going to look back and say, well, I'm glad I was able to pay that electric bill in 2005 or whatever.
Yeah.
Or am I going to remember, the people who came to us because we were, essentially a source of hope and an alternative for them when they didn't really have much.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's what I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's one of the reasons that we're kind of leaning towards, doing more of the process, like the dried mushrooms or like the teas, which are essentially a hot water extract, right? And your or supplements or, again, like imagine a business where your business is essentially helping people who have been through, any kind of traumatic experience, right? You name it.
Yeah. Any
kind of post-traumatic syndrome, right? And your business is trying to get them over it, right? Yeah. That's what you're doing. And just seems like we could use our skills in growing mushrooms that we've developed over the years, selling at all these different places to really, make it take a step up. Like we're not just selling mushrooms, right? We're not just making money. You're actually making a difference, right?
Yeah, that's wild.
And so I don't know how. I feel like in 20 years, if I were to ignore that, I feel like I probably would regret that.
Yeah.
That opportunity. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So.
Well, this is not the conversation I thought we were going to have, but I have to say,
yeah, it's probably a lot different than our last one. That's for sure.
But I'm thrilled with it. This was phenomenal. This is like the day of like illuminating. That's not the right word, but conversations. So yeah. Well, thanks, man, so much for coming up all the way and talking. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we're, every Tuesday we're in here.
Yeah.
Delivering to Syracuse. So if you're a restaurant and you're listening, just
for sure.
Send me a text or an email or something.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
We'll have website and all that kind of stuff in the show notes.
Great.
So
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.